Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for July 9th, 2024. What we're seeing in the last couple of days has been a lesson in diplomacy, which is probably not lost on leaders of the West who have given up on diplomacy and negotiations. I'm talking about the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who was first in Kiev to meet with Zelensky. Then he went to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin, then to Beijing to meet with Xi Jinping, and he is probably coming to Washington, D.C. for the NATO summit, which begins today. Now, Orban said his message is seeking peace in the Russian-Ukraine war. He's currently the president of the Council of the European Union, much to the chagrin of the leaders of NATO and the European Union bureaucracy, who would rather not have someone who is trying to talk with the supposed adversaries. Now, his message is clear. It's diplomacy, not missiles, not war. He said NATO's purpose is to keep peace, not to have war. And while he was meeting with Putin, he discussed the Putin plan for peace. He briefed Putin on his meeting with Zelensky. In China, he talked to Xi Jinping about the Chinese plan, which the Chinese have worked out with the Brazilians to achieve a peace plan for ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. Now, Orban, as I said, is under intense criticism. They say he doesn't represent the European Union or NATO. That Ursula von der Leyen said he's on a mission of appeasement. Well, anyone who tries to break the stalemate of war is considered an appeaser or a mouthpiece for Putin. But Orban did an interview with Weltwoche, a German newspaper, and here's what he said. He said, peacemaking is a Christian action. It's a moral issue. And he said there must be direct connections to the leaders of the two warring parties. Now, this is a message which is essential for the leaders of Europe, who so far have gone along with the US and the British demand of no talks with Putin. Biden hasn't talked to Putin since December 2022. Now, while Orban is on his mission, Prime Minister Modi of India was in Moscow to meet with Putin. And the two leaders said their goal is to strengthen the relationship between the two nations. Now, there's been a huge amount of pressure put on India, especially by the British and the Americans, to break with Russia. It's not going to work. India has a commitment to the idea of non-alignment. They have very good relations with Russia, both in terms of military strategic policy as well as economics. One of the things that Modi and Putin are talking about is cooperation on energy, particularly nuclear energy. And they're also discussing the easing of transfer of funds between the two countries, which will increase the trade, and which is part of the initiative being taken now by the BRICS nations. So what you see with the Modi visit, with the Orban visit, is the idea of peaceful resolution through negotiations and a connection between that and economic development. Now, in contrast, we have the NATO summit, which gets underway today in Washington. Biden is supposed to be there. Just one word on Biden. His interview with George Stephanopoulos, which was supposed to reestablish Biden as a peacemaker, as a serious president, what he said is, quote, "I'm running the world," unquote, when Stephanopoulos asked him about his mental condition. And then Biden went on to show why people are worried about him. He said, "I'm the guy that put NATO together. No one thought I could expand it. I'm the guy that shut Putin down. No one thought it could happen." Then he went on to meander into the discussion of the Australia, United Kingdom, US, the so-called AUKUS military alliance in the Pacific. He said, I got 50 nations to help Ukraine. I got the Japanese to expand their budget, and so on. So besides the megalomania, you see that he's acknowledging that he's the one who's pushing the war, pushing the confrontation and the provocations against Russia, China, and other countries. Now, at the NATO summit, Stoltenberg, the outgoing Secretary General, said that the primary goal will be to consolidate a permanent NATO command for Ukraine. And the purpose for this is to make sure there's something in place in case Trump gets elected and there's a devaluation of NATO by the United States, that is, moves away from NATO, that NATO must be prepared to take on the task itself. Stoltenberg said there are 500,000 NATO soldiers on heightened alert status. For what? Does Stoltenberg really believe that Putin is going to conquer Ukraine and then take on the Baltic countries and Poland, which is what he's saying? This is the line that you get in Europe, that the reason there must be a NATO buildup and must continue to get weapons to Ukraine is if Putin wins in Ukraine, there's nothing to stop him from marching all the way across Europe. Well, nothing except reality. More competent military experts, such as Ray McGovern, 27 years with the CIA, former briefer of the president, General Harold Kuyat, top official of the Bundeswehr in Germany, what they've been saying is that the proof that Putin was not intending to move further west is what he did in March 2022, when within 1 month of the special military operation being launched in Ukraine, he sat down to negotiate a peace agreement. And the central issue in the peace agreement was that Ukraine must not go into NATO, and that Ukraine must be a neutral country, which is a buffer between NATO and Russia. And those are still the terms that Putin is talking about, and that Ukraine cannot be allowed to be built up as a NATO force on Russia's border. So he was ready to sign that. So was Zelensky. And it was sabotaged by Boris Johnson on behalf of NATO. Now, if you look at NATO, you realize the leaders coming into this summit are very weak. Biden, I already mentioned. Macron barely survived the special vote that he declared for the National Assembly. France is going to be in a somewhat chaotic state for the next months while they're trying to figure out how to live with cohabitation. Scholz is very weak in Germany. And Starmer, the new prime minister in the United Kingdom, was elected not because of his qualities and talents. He's basically a front man for the Tony Blair interests in the City of London, as were the Tories. There's no substantial difference between Starmer and Sunak. But the vote was largely a rejection of the Tories, and Starmer's first call was to Zelensky, or to Biden and then Zelensky. I don't know which one he called first, but to pledge permanent friendship and commitment of the United Kingdom to winning the war in Ukraine. So this is not exactly a peace process that's underway from NATO, and the NATO leaders are not capable of doing that, the leaders of the NATO countries. So we're seeing the Asian Pacific region growing economically, strategically, and the West is stagnant with no new ideas. So the issues of peace or war, of economic development or austerity, these are the issues that are going to be determined in the weeks and months ahead. Now, tomorrow I'll have my weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche where we'll discuss these issues. But I think it's crucial that people look at the SchillerInstitute.com website and the LaRouche Organization website to find out what's actually occurring in the world. And again, I'll put up the offer for the free month of the online Executive Intelligence Review Daily News so that you can actually have a picture of the world that's not controlled by the corporate cartels that are committed to war. So thanks for joining me today. See you again tomorrow.